there's a lot of talk about what's going on in Israel right now. We got peace somehow, kinda, but this hasn't happened before. And I would say it's not the peace that Daniel's referring to, and we're going to get into that in Daniel 9, unless there is some sort of a temple involved. There has to be this construction of a temple. So we're going to kind of take a look at that, because it's very important that you can't sit there and go, well, there's this peace accord, and so therefore it must be the thing that's pointing towards this thing that Daniel's talking about, unless there's a temple involved. And I do believe, I don't want to say I believe, but I would not be shocked. There would be no part of this peace deal that surprises me if here shortly we discover that, hey, there's a temple involved. So we're going to kind of take a look at that, and we know this to be a very important aspect of the end times prophecy about Christ's second coming, because Jesus specifically said in Matthew 24, when the disciples asked him about the end time, he said this in Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. So what Jesus is talking about is, when you see this thing happen that Daniel was talking about, then you will know that this is a sign to start behaving a certain way. Because I think a lot of people think you're just going to stand there and stare at the end times and there's nothing you can do about it. And we went through the book of Revelation verse by verse, and a common phrase I always said, maybe every single episode, is it's so important to understand the book of Revelation, not only so you can know what's going to happen, but so you can know what you should be doing in the end times. Because he goes on to say, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. So in other words, when you see this happen, you got to go, you got to hide. You got to run for the mountains is what you need to do. So it's really important we kind of understand, well, what exactly is he talking about, and what about this peace deal somehow relates to this? So when Jesus says the abomination spoken of by Daniel, what he's talking about Daniel 9, starting in verse 27. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So what would have to happen, and what we already see happening, and that's why I believe a temple is on its way, and I believe it's already in the discussion of this peace deal, because the peace deal is really, a lot of it has to do with what Jordan said, because they're kind of the stewards of the Temple Mount at this time, and what Israel is doing, what the United States is doing, and all these things are going to come together as a common peace deal that leads to the temple. Because something we saw last week, very unique thing, and I don't know if anybody actually knows about this. I've seen it, and I know other people have. I don't want to say no one, but it's not nobody's talking about it in mainstream media, is that Jews are literally praying on the Temple Mount for the first time in well over 1,000 years. The fact that they are there and they are bowing down and praying on the Temple Mount, that's a big one. That is a big one. That is a big one. More so, there's been people leading goats up there, taking goats up there. You know, they're being told to leave, but they're still bringing them. You have the red heifers. That's a whole other video to talk about, but those are ready to go. All these things are just ready. They are ready to go. And what we're seeing here is that when that deal is made, at some point within those first 3.5 years, there will be a temple, there will be sacrifices, and in the middle of that, the Antichrist will stand in the temple and declare himself to be God. Then that's when Jesus says you got to run for the hills. So it's very important we kind of not just say, oh, look, there's a peace deal. It must be that. There's a very important aspect of the temple involved as well. You can't have one without, well, you can't say that there's this peace deal without the temple. You just simply can't. You can't. If you don't have the temple, it is not the thing that Daniel is talking about. Just that straightforward. So there you go, man. Any thoughts or insights you might have on this, definitely put it below.